I was definitely more comfortable looking for a home after talking to you after our call. We booked for the weekend, and I was also surprised of the amount of houses you were able to book in the same day. So that really helped us. Being able to see a lot of houses in the same day just made the process for us easier, and also to be able to compare them in a short period of time. We hear a lot in Canada about Toronto and Vancouver, and we only hear about having multiple offers and then having overprice. So I thought that it was going to be almost impossible to reduce the price. So I think I was more confident that we could make it work. And even if we found a home that was more expensive, that potentially we could get the price down. So it's something that paid off in the end.
All right, I'm Trevor Tardif with YEG Pro Realty, and we're here for the third episode of the Homebuyers Journey. And today I'm with Rafaela Santiago, who just bought a property earlier this year. And I wanted to thank you so much for joining me, Rafaela. And how you doing today?
Thank you, Trevor. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Good to have you on the show. You're my third episode. And I think people could learn a lot from your experience since you just bought a townhouse here. But before we get into that, do you mind kind of giving me a little bit of tell me a little bit about your background story, where you're from, when did you move to Edmonton, that kind of thing?
So I'm originally from Brazil. I moved to Canada in 2016, but I've only lived in Edmonton for a year. Um, and yeah, the story is that I wasn't necessarily looking to buy a home, but it was something that fortunately happened, and a lot of things happened in a very short period of time.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you weren't originally looking to buy a home, but then something changed. That kind of leads into my next question: is why did you decide to buy a home in the first place?
Yeah, so we were renting here. We didn't know if we were going to stay in Edmonton or if we were going to go back to Calgary. But the rent was going to go up significantly, and we received notes 6 months before the end of the lease. And then we had to make a decision. So we had to either look for a place for rent, or we were also concerned about the interest rates going up. So we thought maybe that's a possibility for us to buy a home. We already had a little bit of savings. We wouldn't have much, so we were looking maybe a condo, but we also didn't want to sacrifice living in a townhouse. So basically, I think that's when we started developing our rules. So basically, we decided we were only going to buy something if it's a townhouse. And if we can't, then we just are going to rent something. So it was a very definite line for us. And I think that helped as well in the filtering when things started to become more real.
Yeah, well, I remember you guys you reached out to me and you booked a call with me. I think it was like mid-July, like July 20th or something like that. And at the time when you booked your call, you left me the message with it. You said you were first-time home buyers and that you were looking for a townhouse. You already had your pre-approval for 225,000, but you wanted to keep it lower than that, around the $170,000 range. You mentioned south and west end of Edmonton, and you even had a must-have list. So you knew you wanted a basement, you wanted some yard space, 2 to 3 bedrooms, at least one bathroom, but you preferred two. And you also said that you must move out by September 30th. So I'm assuming that has to do with the lease
The least.
situation. And that you also had a pre-approval expiry that was in October. You also gave me a couple examples of places that you had already kind of checked out online that you were interested in, and that you were willing to do a renovation, but you'd like to keep it minimal if possible, and that you were looking forward to the call. So you were pretty far ahead in terms of how specific you guys were by the time that you reached out to me. So we had our call, and what changed for you after our initial call? What did you learn?
I was definitely more comfortable looking for a home after talking to you, knowing that the interest rates were only going to go higher, and that We could find a townhouse definitely in our situation. I think before I had been watching your videos and looking online for the houses that were available, and I kept seeing that the inventory was going lower and less options and not many coming up. So I thought that we could check the homes, and then if we found one that would match all our criteria and work for our family, I think we could make it work. So I think I was more confident that we could make it work. And even if we found a home that was more expensive, that potentially we could get the price down because the interest rates were going up. So having that balance.
Yeah. So would you say before our call you didn't really know that you could negotiate on prices, or you just weren't sure how much?
Exactly, yeah. I thought that because we hear a lot in Canada about Toronto and Vancouver, and we only hear about having multiple offers and then having over price. So I thought that it was going to be almost impossible to reduce the price. So it's something that paid off in the end as well.
Yeah, like the headlines and whatnot from what's happening in Toronto and Vancouver definitely dominate the conversation in the national media. So I could understand that. And then once we had our call, things moved pretty quickly after that, didn't they? I think we were out looking at townhouses within 1 to 3 days or something like that. Is that how you remember it as well?
Yeah, I think after our call, we booked for the weekend, and I was also surprised of the amount of houses you were able to book in the same day. So that really helped us because with Emily and everything, it's just scheduling things. It's more complicated with her nap times and all of that. So being able to see a lot of houses in the same day just made the process for us easier, and also to be able to compare them in a short period of time.
Yeah, that's true. I've had that happen with a few different people when they come on as a client, where they're used to what it's like when you're looking at rentals, and you're usually booking them each individually, and you might have one today at 4 p.m. and then another one tomorrow in the morning, and it's just really spread out. Whereas when you're buying and you're working with an agent, usually you can just try to line them up, go bang, 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 and look at them back to back as best as we can. Sometimes we still have to work with the seller's schedule, but that really simplifies things for people. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's not something that crosses my mind very often on something to tell people, but they might not know that coming in, that you can look at 2 to 3 properties per hour. And so if you've got 2 or 3 hours, you could easily look at 6 to 10 properties kind of thing. So where can we go from here? So let's look at your search criteria a little bit. We did talk about this. You already had a very good idea, but I'm kind of curious how you came to the conclusion that you wanted a townhouse. You mentioned that you had decided you didn't want an apartment. Why is that?
Just because when we first arrived here in Canada, we lived in a basement, and I think the darkness and the lack of sun and not having an outdoor space for ourselves was very depressing.
Yeah.
So
especially in the winter.
Yeah, and after that we were able to move into a condo. It was just on the main floor, but still it wasn't pleasant because we had noises from other people. We had shared laundry, so it wasn't ideal. And after that, we moved then to the rental in a townhouse, and that's when everything felt more like home. So it felt like we had our garden, our garage, or it felt exactly as I wanted. And as at the same time, I also don't like big homes, and that's a little bit of a difference between me and my husband. I like to have a smaller space that I can clean really quickly, but it's in a better location rather than living in the suburbs. So I think that's when we got into the agreement that we're not going to the extreme small, but not to the extreme big. So we're just going to be with a townhouse, which is perfect.
Yeah, it's that happy medium. Okay, so that's interesting. It wasn't from just your experience living in an apartment. It was also getting to experience living in a townhouse as a rental and realizing, wow, having the yard, having a little bit more space, but not too much. It does feel a lot more like home.
Yes, yes.
Okay. If you're looking at buying or selling a home in the next year, it's important to know what's going on in the Edmonton housing market. So what I've done is I've created a new Facebook group where I will provide updates on a weekly basis on what I see happening in the Edmonton real estate market, as well as access to PDF reports each month that show you exactly what's been happening in the market over the last month, and links to my latest YouTube videos where I go through an in-depth market analysis. Also going to be covering a lot of other stuff in that group. It's free to join the group. All you have to do is go to edmontonhousingmarket.ca, put in your email address, and I'll send you an invitation to join the group. Again, that's edmontonhousingmarket.ca, and then that way you can stay up to date on everything that's going on in the Edmonton real estate market. And one thing that I know mattered to you guys was nearby schools for your daughter. And I believe you looked at the Fraser Institute for reviews. Did you find researching schools on that website helpful to you, or not so much?
I still haven't made a decision on which school I'm going to enroll her, but I think it's one of the criterias for me. It's the academic part and the rating of the school academically. But I also looked at Google reviews, for example, for input from the students or from the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, was one of the things that made me decide for the west side of Edmonton, was because the schools here, there were a few that I particularly liked because they were academically higher in the score.
Mm-hmm.
But I also looked at the actual designated school for this neighborhood.
Yeah, based on your
And
part, where you're located.
Exactly. And even that one was a good one. And other neighborhoods that we were looking, sometimes there were fairly good schools that would be in the zone, but maybe the designated school wasn't as good. And that's why I always prefer to go to the west. But
Because you
again,
found most of the areas that you ended up looking at on the west end that the designated school tended to be good. Yeah.
Good.
And I do think that's good to keep in mind, because the designated school is basically the one that you're essentially guaranteed to get into based on your address. So for other people that are looking, if you don't like the designated school, there's no guarantee that you'll get into one of those other ones, even if they're still close by. So I do think that's important to remember. I don't remember the exact website, but there is a website where you can look up. You can basically punch in an address and it'll tell you what the designated school is for any address. So for anybody that's listening or watching and you're wondering, if you're looking at a home on the MLS, just find the website for the Edmonton Public, and you can put in the address and find out if that's what your designated school is. So let's look going into one other thing. I think we talked about the Edmonton crime map. I always call it the Edmonton crime map. I think the Edmonton police refer to it as the community safety map, because I think using the word safety sounds better than crime. What was that map any use to you when you were looking as well?
As well, yes. I think that's one of the things that we were putting in the criteria, but because of our limitation of the budget, that's when we started to filter out some of the neighborhoods because of their crime rates.
Mm-hmm.
They are much smaller than Brazil, of course, but still thinking about my daughter and wanting her to grow up in a safe place, I think that was one of the factors that also helped us filter some of the homes.
Mm-hmm. So you found it was still a useful tool just to compare different neighborhoods and kind of see, like, the crime happens everywhere, but you can still see which areas might have a little bit more. I think they have it on like a rolling 4 or 5 months, maybe 3 or somewhere in that 3 to 5 months, where you can look back on basically all the different crimes that have been reported in different neighborhoods. So,
and even it's very useful because you can see the types of crimes that were committed. So there were some neighborhoods that had arson or rape, and others were just break in and enter. So the type of crime also made a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It gives you an idea, and it is on a rolling timeline. So it's not like if you go and look at it, like what happened, a bad crime happened in the last few months, doesn't mean that they'll necessarily will be in the future. It's obviously a sensitive topic, but I always like to let people
Yes.
know that, hey, if you're concerned about that kind of stuff, here's some real data that you can go and look at and just get more information. So we looked at townhouses on both the south side, the west end. You ended up picking a place on the west end. So let's see, you guys took action on that one. I think it was the end of July. So it was really within a week or two of when we first spoke that I believe we wrote that offer, and you closed on the property in September. It was priced at 170,000, and we managed to get it for 159,500. What was your experience with that negotiation?
Um, it was surprising. Again, looking at the possibility of reducing the price. And I didn't know if we were going to get it or not because we were going to be under the asking price. But even it was a surprise for us that it was so fast as well because the house that we bought and the one I'm living right now, it wasn't on our list. It wasn't at all in the list of houses that we wanted to look. It was just because we had more time than we could fit it in. And when we arrived, it was exactly what we were looking for. So I think both Jason and I, when we were reviewing the houses we saw with you, it was very clear for us that this was the one that matched everything perfectly. So the negotiation about the price itself, I was, yeah, happy that it ended up being well, but it, even the last part of, okay, we're going to need to do some renovations here, and this is the amount we're planning to spend, and how much they were able to accept. I think that was really helpful as well. I didn't expect. So.
Yeah, because I remember with this one, I felt like it after I did the research on it, when you knew you wanted to write an offer on it, that I could tell that it was overpriced in my opinion, based on recent ones that had sold. There had been one that sold in there for 160,000. So even though they were priced at 170, I thought we could be a little bit more aggressive on that one, and we had to go back and forth with them a little bit, but we did, I think, initially get them down to that 160, and then later on, after the inspection and whatnot, we got them to come down a little bit more because there was a few surprises. So when we put that offer together, I remember you had a financing condition, a property inspection condition, and a condo document condition. So let's talk about financing. I think you guys went through RBC.
Yes.
Why did you pick RBC?
So I just had banking with RBC, and I also have banking with another bank that I'm not going to mention that we had bad experiences. So back in June, I think that's when we did the pre-approval process with the bank. And I didn't know about a mortgage broker by then. So I just left it for the weekend, asked a few friends. And by the time that I contacted the mortgage broker, the interest rate had already gone up. So she said, I can't get a better rate than that, just keep the bank. And it only kept going up and up as time went by. So we ended up not having another option, and that's why we had to go with the bank.
Okay, yeah, that fills in a bit of a gap either in my memory, or maybe, I don't know if we had talked about those details. We probably did, and I just forgot. But so basically what you're saying is you wanted to go to a mortgage broker and at least get another option, but since interest rates had gone up since you first met with RBC, they would have put a rate hold in place for you where they kind of froze the rate they could give you, and then a month or two goes by, you're going to go talk to a mortgage broker, but now they can't do better than that because rates have gone up in the meantime. So that definitely makes the point that it's worth getting a rate hold when you're shopping. Since you guys had done that, you were able to get that better rate, whereas if you would have never taken that step until later, you would have been forced to pay a higher interest rate. So that makes sense why you ended up going with RBC, because it ended up being the best deal that you had available to you since you already had the rate hold. And you guys also, if I remember correctly, you used what's called the RRSP Homebuyers plan as well, right?
I have to confirm on that one. I think in the end it didn't work.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, just because I started the contribution for the RRSP in February. So I think it has to be contributed after my probation period. And then there is
Oh,
a
okay.
rule of how long after the purchase price I can get the money from. So that's why I think we changed the date as well in the conditions, because it was going to expire in the end of September, and then that's why we or something like
I
that,
know we did
or
move around the dates there.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, because my understanding with the home buyer's plan for anybody that's listening is it's basically allows you to take money out of your RSPs to use it in your purchasing of your first home. And usually the money has to have been in your RSPs for at least 3 months before you can take it out.
that's the rule. Yeah.
What you said about the probation period with related to your work is news to me. I don't know if that's related to that or
No,
if you actually hadn't had enough time pass from when you put the money in. Is that kind of what you're saying?
exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I only opened the RRSP after the probation period, and then the money has to be in the account for 3 months. So that's exactly it. The 3 months from the probation to start the RRSP, and then 3 months for the um, being able to withdraw the money for the home buyer's plan.
Oh, okay. But you're not sure if it ever ended up quite working out as planned. I thought we had lined up the dates on that, but maybe it was maybe it worked out a little bit differently. Okay. Now, one other thing that was important to you guys was you were concerned about things like asbestos, lead in the water, I think volatile oxygen compounds or
Organic.
VOC or organic. That's what it is. I was like,
Yeah.
what's the O? What's the O? So you were concerned about those things from a health perspective, and you ended up doing some of your own testing. You had found a company. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so because we knew we were going to get an older place and renovate, we were concerned about the health implications, particularly the lead in water. It can affect brain development of children. And it is bioaccumulating, so even ourselves just drinking it, we're just accumulating lead in our bodies. And asbestos as well, it's something that if it's disturbed, it can cause lung cancer. So it was very important for us to test and know if this would be a possibility, because otherwise we would have to replace a lot more than we wanted. But for asbestos, the testing it had to be um, done in an
Invasive
after,
manner. Yeah,
yeah,
is
in
that how
an
they
invasive.
describe it? You actually have to take a
Yeah,
sample, right?
exactly. So it had to be done after the purchase, and the water was the one that we could do um, before the closing. So it's something that we were able to do before, and that's when we started finding a lot of problems. But yeah, including lead. There was lead in the water, and
Yeah.
then
So you got a positive result on the water, and then what recommendation did the company make, or what did you do to sort of remedy that?
so I called the Edmonton supply. I believe it's at
Epcor.
Epcor. Yes, that's the one. They guaranteed that there is no lead in the water that they supply, but the lead could be in the faucets of the home or in the pipes inside the home. And then I started calling filtering companies that they provide water filtering
Filtration. Yeah.
systems. Yeah, there is the whole house, but basically, what I was instructed is that any kind of carbon activated filter would be able to remove the lead. So even those we can just buy at superstore, just the containers where you put water. And so that's what we have been doing so far, because we haven't been able to renovate and remove the faucet. And then we would need to test again to check if it was just the faucet. But the faucet is something that I wanted to change anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not an added cost or a surprise, but at the same time, it's something that we wanted to be careful about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you just ended up deciding to go with like a basic filtration option for your drinking water. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good for kind of people to keep in mind. So you had to hold off on the asbestos testing until after you closed on it, and you did end up doing some asbestos testing on multiple different things, right?
Yes, we did the popcorn ceiling, the ceiling tile in the basement, and the flooring, which we were also removing.
Mm-hmm. And those all came back negative, if I remember correctly, right?
No,
No?
no. The popcorn ceiling was surprisingly that we didn't have it, but the negative surprise was finding that it had asbestos in the flooring, and that's when we stopped everything because we were already starting to take out the flooring and then figuring out what were we going to do, because it was something that I never thought that there could be asbestos in flooring.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I thought you had done two different sets of testing. So you did you test all of it at the same time then?
All at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, and with the flooring thing, it was covered by carpet before, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so because otherwise, I remember I told you after you talked to me afterwards that if I would have seen that type of tile, I would have told you there's a high chance that that has asbestos in it, but it was carpeted before, so I didn't see it. And then you guys took the carpet out, and then later on did your testing after you started your renovating. So I thought it would be good for us to talk about, just because you tried to be super careful with your testing and everything, but then even then there were still some surprises with that.
yeah.
There's so many different
Surprise
things that
cost.
it can be in, and it's okay to do what's called encapsulating. So that's what they would have
Yes.
done before. Like if there's in the tile there would have been asbestos. One of the ways that's considered okay to deal with it is to encapsulate it. So that could be putting a different type of flooring on top of it, which is what they did. At who knows how long ago? It was a long time ago, I think, because that carpet was pretty old too. And
Yes.
then at some point you pull that out, and if you don't know to test that as well, then you never know, that might have asbestos as well. So just something for people to keep in mind. Now, you bought a place that you mentioned renovation, so you guys knew it needed a lot of renovations. What type of work had you planned to do to the house, and what did you end up doing?
We knew we had to replace, so the carpet was in rough shape. The ceiling was an extra, just removing the popcorn and painting it. And then we want to paint the walls. That's something we haven't
Haven't done
done
that
yet,
yet?
just because of the asbestos. It delayed all of our calendar, all of our expectations. But and the other thing is the bathroom as well, bathroom tiles, the sinks, the faucets. But that's something that also was postponed because of the asbestos. So, but the house was in an okay living standard, like we are living right now. It's okay. It's just not to my taste. So it's something that even the furnace as well, I want to replace, but apparently the grants here in Edmonton have been canceled. So it's something that
Like
we were,
for getting that, like the grants for putting a higher efficiency furnace or that kind of thing. Yeah, they
exactly.
kind of come and go. Hopefully we get another one here soon, but
Yeah, and we also wanted to get air source heat pump. It's like air conditioning for the summer, but we couldn't get both at the same time. So we could get the furnace right now, but the air source heat pump only in the summer. But the HVAC contractors were also saying that it's better to do all at once. So it's something that we also decided to postpone. And one thing that was also surprising is that the furnace wasn't working. We only found out when it started to get really cold.
oh,
And
it wasn't working well.
it
Okay.
wasn't working at all. So many surprises with buying older places. So a lot of investigation. Why isn't it heating, and being concerned about the winter coming and having to replace as urgency. But it was just turned off. So
Oh, it just
luckily,
didn't have the power switch was turned off.
yes. So luckily, it was just that we turned it on, and then the furnace turned on right away.
That must have been a huge
Other,
relief.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And other things that were a little bit of inconvenient after we moved, but we couldn't have figured out, were the washer and the dryer were also not working properly.
Which you
So
can
after
never really know until you put a pair, like if you put some dirty laundry in there and you see how it comes out, right?
exactly, yeah. And then we just cut the duct was too high, so that the washer couldn't drain properly. And the same for the dryer, the duct was loose on the floor, so we just had to make it
Tighten that
tighter.
up. Yeah.
But it's little things. We looked at the machines. The machines look okay, but those details that only by using them after moving in that we found out.
Yeah, there's always some surprises, and it seems like you guys had a few there, but you're working through them. So you guys have at least done some flooring. I know you also had plans to eventually renovate the kitchen too. So over time, you're planning to kind of do like a whole reno, and that was always sort of part of your plan, right? Like you wanted it to be livable right now, do some work, and then upgrade it over time and kind of make it your own.
Exactly. So having the reduced cost helped because then the down payment is lower, the mortgage payment is lower, and then the money we can save every month is higher, and then we can then do a big reno. But the plans for the kitchen changed. I just wanted to do a smaller change in the kitchen, but
Mm-hmm.
then my husband was happy to just gut everything out. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. I just don't know when it will happen, but it's something that will make the place look completely different.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you are gonna do a complete kitchen gut as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So that you guys had some construction experience, so you were a little bit more comfortable taking on a property that you knew needed renovations. And just for people's reference, like we're talking about townhouses that were built in like the mid '70s. So I think there had been some things that had been done in it at some point, but nothing that was really recent in that house. So it over time would need a full reno if you wanted to update it. I'm not just a character on YouTube. I also play a realtor in real life. I'm an agent with Yeg Pro Realty here in Edmonton. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home in the Edmonton area, including acreages outside of Edmonton, I encourage you to give me a call at 780-819-5508, or you can book a time on my calendar at booktrevornow.com. All you have to do is select a time on my calendar and I will call you for a free consultation. There's absolutely no pressure. I just want to connect with you, find out how I can help you, and if you end up wanting to work with me in the future, whether that's right away, 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, that's totally fine. I just want to help you however I can. So go to booktrevornow.com, select a time on my calendar, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you. What advice do you have for people that are considering buying a property that needs renovations? Like, what are some things that they should keep in mind?
To always plan that things are going to come up. So having this idea that extra costs are going to appear out of nowhere, it's good to know, especially because we had to make some adjustments right when we moved in. So if we had spent all our money in the down payment, we would be in a very tight position after moving in. So
Mm-hmm.
having that buffer. So for example, even the pre-approval, I asked for more because I thought we were going to find a home that was going to meet our criteria within that budget, but we were able to stay well below that. So,
Mm-hmm. So that gave you the wiggle room, and you already had a budget set aside for renovations versus if someone went to their absolute max and bought a property that probably could use some renovations, then they might have some discomfort at the very least if they have to move into it and they can't really afford to make the changes that they need to. So definitely important to have some extra cash for renovations.
on that same note, so we were renting, but we got the place 1 month before, so that we had that 1 month for the renovation. So that planning is also important. And with the asbestos, we had 1 week that we couldn't do anything. We couldn't even enter the home because it wasn't safe. So it's
Until you did
just
the
having that
rehabilitation.
time. Exactly. So planning for that period that you're going to be able, you're going to have to pay for both places for utilities, for example, but it's better than struggling to move and line rental with buying a property. It can be complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. If you're buying a property that you know you want to do renovations to, it's way easier to do the renovations before you're living in the home. So
Oh yeah.
it sounds like you're basically saying it's worth it to have that little bit of an extra expense, and maybe you had a month there where you could do your renovations since the asbestos came up and you had to do the rehabilitation. That also gave you that flexibility. Otherwise, if you hadn't planned it that way and that came up, then you would be forced to go like stay in a expensive hotel or something like that. So giving yourself flexibility in your timing.
And especially when moving with all the furniture and everything, you could potentially you have to spend on storage or anything to make that work.
Hmm. Yeah, so it can very easily add up and be more than an extra month of rent at the last place kind of thing. So reflecting on your whole process of buying, is there anything about it that you would do differently if you were doing it all over again?
Um, I don't think we could do anything differently because I wouldn't know then what I know now. So, for example, even the asbestos testing, we couldn't have done that before closing. And also, we only found the asbestos after we removed the carpet and after we
Yeah.
started moving the tile.
Yeah, so even
So,
if you would have been able to do some testing beforehand, that wasn't exposed yet. So yeah,
yeah.
that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if I somehow had magic foresight that you can see through things, maybe. But okay, so you feel like you basically did the best with what you could based on the information that you had available to you.
Yeah, the good surprise was that the neighborhood ended up being even better than what I expected. So it's really nice here to just go for a walk. It's 1 block away from a park, which was a surprise. I didn't even see it in the map, but it's just 1 block away.
That's a special
And
bonus.
yeah, and so many amenities and commercial spaces also not far. So it's just 1 block on one direction and the other. So it was very pleasant to live here. So maybe during the research phase, I could also put that as a weighting factor for the different homes. But in the end, it was a really good place. I'm really happy with it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think that's not necessarily something people always put top of mind, but if you have walking distance to certain amenities, that's a big plus. If you don't have to drive, or if you're sharing a car kind of thing, it gives you that flexibility where someone could still go do errands without needing to wait for the car, or it can just be nice to go do that thing by walking instead, except for maybe when it's really cold, it gives you an excuse to go for a walk instead of having to drive everywhere. So would you say that's something that made being in a bit more of a central location, like not like you mentioned suburbs, in suburbs you can usually still get everything you need, but you're going to be further away from a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but even here, we're very close to the library, very close to YMCA, very close, and even not far away from the main highways. So Anthony Henry Drive and White Mud Drive. So if we need to get to downtown, it's not as far.
Hmm.
Um, so I know the appeal of having everything brand new and the very customized and made to fit your preferences. But I think we can also get an existing property and make it look like what we want. It's just more of a project
Hmm.
than just moving in. So I also like this idea of having a project and testing and seeing how things change over the years. And
Hmm.
yeah, I
There's
don't
some
know.
excitement in that too. Instead of you can make it your own.
Yeah, exactly. And finding what works and what doesn't work, because sometimes I look at a place and maybe it fits in my head, but then when you actually live in it, it's completely different. Even though I have a training in architecture, it's still very different than actually living in the place.
Yeah. So have you found, and you mentioned some of your plans changed. Is part of that because once you were living in the place, you've got more time, when you're sitting in the living room or you're sitting in your kitchen, just going about your daily life, that you can start to think about how you might do things a little bit differently and kind of let it percolate?
Yeah, yeah, especially little things like the lighting or I found some cold spots here too, so I know what I don't want to put in those places. Um, and it's things that we wouldn't know if we weren't living in it, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, there's all like it doesn't matter whether you're buying a new house or an old house. There's always going to be some little surprises like that you just need like enough time in the house to actually notice those types of things. How long do you see yourself staying in your current home?
I'm not sure.
Not
the
sure.
future, the future can change anytime. So um, I do see with myself living in this place until retirement or who knows when. But again, anything can change. Right now, we are both employed here in Edmonton, but I personally have a my heart is in Calgary. So
In Calgary, blasphemy. Could have picked any other city and you would have gotten a pass, but no, it had to be the main rival. That's
yeah,
funny.
it's where we went for the college and the first place we arrived here in Canada. So it was very welcoming. It's where I made all my friends. And Edmonton is a good city, but it's, I don't know, still.
It's not as close to the mountains.
That's true. Yeah, that on top of it.
Okay, so you could potentially see yourself here long term, but if a really great opportunity came up in Calgary or somewhere else, then that can obviously change. What advice, based on your experience, what advice would you have for other buyers, other people that are looking at buying their first home?
Um, to plan ahead and to do a lot of research. A lot of research. There is never enough. I think this idea that we didn't know if we were renting or if we were going to buy a home, and then getting the lockdown of the rate ended up being what saved us, because with the interest rates going up and everything, even if we weren't certain, there was no downside in doing the pre-approval.
Mm-hmm.
um, and also being able to watch the homes and just seeing how many are being sold and how many are staying in the market also gave me that sense of, okay, the market is changing, and what am I going to do? So and it took a while. I think I had been looking potentially since the beginning of the year until June. That's when we received the notice. So it's
Mm.
something that was in the mind, but just as a hobby for myself,
Yeah. Yeah,
not
which is
necessarily.
common. It starts off just sort of casually browsing or online shopping almost kind of thing. Um, what part did you struggle with the most in buying your house?
Um, I'm not sure.
So many struggles, or it was a breeze?
I think the biggest struggle was after we found out about the asbestos. So it was after the closing. So it wasn't necessarily the process of buying a home. That was actually very straightforward. It was after we moved in that everything
Dealing with the
started
projects.
to show up, yeah, and the surprises. But I think also for people that watch the series of home renovations, like there's so many on the TV that you know that there are going to be surprises, but when you're actually going through it, it's
Yeah, going through
nerve
it
wracking.
yourself.
Yeah.
That's funny. Um, and let's circle back here a little bit. So you mentioned earlier that you found me on YouTube. Is that right? And
Yes.
so how did you come across on YouTube? Were you doing a lot of research on YouTube about the housing market, or how was that
Um,
useful for you?
so I have a friend in Calgary who's a real estate agent, but she doesn't work in Edmonton because it's too far. So
Yeah.
I had to look for someone. So we actually received a referral from one of Jason's friends, but I was so unsure about the financial situation for us, if we were going to be able to get it, if the interest rates were going to go up, or if we better wait for the 6 month and buy a home next year, or um, seasonal or
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, and I didn't feel that I could trust that person. So they didn't have answers for my questions. They didn't know about so the Edmonton market update that you do on YouTube was very helpful, and that's when I think we started trusting you right away, because you already deal with the numbers. You already know what to expect. So and that was true as well with the negotiation that we did in the end. It really paid off. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you were kind of looking. You had some unease with someone else that you were working with a little bit, and you were looking for a little bit more certainty and understanding on like the what was actually happening in the market. So you found the stats and commentary, I guess, useful.
Yeah, because I don't know a lot about economics and how, even talking about interest rates, like how is it going to impact things, and the price, how is it related to it, and is it better to wait? Is it better to, because last year the rates were really good, but the prices were higher, so it's always like a balance, and so I didn't know if it was a good time, bad time to be looking for a property. And I think your updates made it very informative and easy to understand. So it was easy to see the trend and see, okay, maybe now it's the time to um, get more serious about buying a home.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could see how that would have helped give you guys some clarity and some confidence. And I think it's something a lot of buyers have been struggling with this last year and still today, because it's almost like the number one question, like, is now a good time to buy or should I wait? What do you remember what interest rate you guys ended up getting on your mortgage?
I think it was 4.19.
4.19. Yeah. So like they're up like a full percent from that even now. So you guys were kind of right in the middle of how when it was shifting, and they were in the middle of the interest rate increases. So there was a lot of uncertainty then. It still kind of continues now. So one thing I always tell people to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out timing is, number one, you're never going to time it perfectly. You could spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, and there's never the exact perfect time to buy, and if there is, the chances of you actually guessing are pretty slim. So usually I tell people, don't stretch yourself too thin, which you guys definitely didn't. Make sure you're buying something that you could see working for you and that you're going to be comfortable in. But if you're looking for the longer term, then timing the market's not going to be the most important thing. So that's really cool to hear. Oh, I thought you were going to say something. What are some things that we haven't talked about that you think would be worth mentioning?
Um, there is something about the financing again. In the end, my husband wasn't able to get employment in his area of study. So he went to construction, and in construction, he is self-employed. He has a company of himself, and then he works um, that way. But that was a very bad problem for the financing in the bank. So they just didn't consider his income, even though he has been working in Canada for the past 5 years. Um, just just because he was a contractor. So in the end, it had to be just with my income, and that lowered, of course, our maximum purchase price. But that's something that we didn't know. Coming to Canada, we didn't know that there would be a difference between being a salary employee or a contract employee, or being
Self-employed.
contractor, yeah, self-employed. So it's something that impacted the financing. In the end, it was also um, within our budget, within what we wanted to spend in the home. But it's something that if people want to get that fancy home at the higher end, um, being self-employed, it has a lot more rules, and for our experience, the bank simply didn't accept it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because you found out pretty quick because you went to the bank, right? And so sometimes if people kind of take that for granted, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're both working, like we make this much, we should be fine. They could use online calculators. But if they don't know that, and if they haven't actually gone through the process of getting pre-approved, it might be a big surprise later on. Oh no, we can only use one of our incomes, we can't use both of ours. My general rule of thumb with contract work or self-employed is, typically my understanding is that they want to look at the last 2 years of history. So you have to have been doing the same thing for at least 2 years, and then they want to see like 2 full years of income before they start allowing that. So yeah, if someone's listening and they're in that situation where they're self-employed, that you should know right away that could be a challenge, and that you should probably try to get pre-approved to find out if that's going to be an issue. Otherwise, you might only be able to use one of your incomes, or have to wait until you have at least 2 years history. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, for example, my husband, despite having 5 years here, he had only been in Edmonton for less than a year, or a little bit more. So I don't know exactly why the difference in location made that difference, or if potentially a mortgage broker would have more options than a bank, or if he was to go through the bank, it was just going to be a more externals um, process of going to the very details of everything that comes in and everything that comes out. So
yeah, if it was, it could be just because I don't know if it was the exact same work or if it was a different company he started when he came to Edmonton, but they might have just looked at that as a reset. The same thing can also happen even if someone is a salaried employee. There's certain types of work where they're okay with you moving into a new role and then counting that income very quickly, whereas other times for certain types of work they might want to see that you've been there for a year or two, or at least past your probationary period. So the lenders treat everything a little bit different, and as you mentioned, it could even depend on which bank you're going with. A mortgage broker would have access to other lenders as well, and they've all got slightly different programs and different options. So it's always important for people to try to look into those, because you can't take anything for granted. You don't know what hoops that the lenders will want you to jump through to get the pre-approval.
Yeah, definitely. And also another thing that I don't understand a lot about, it's between fixed and variable rates. In the end, we had to go with a fixed rate because it was what the bank gave us. So variable wasn't even on the table for us.
Okay.
But it's something as well that the rules about having a variable and then changing for a fixed, but not being able to go from a fixed to a variable later was also a little bit concerning to me. But it was what we had.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you there's definitely some people that went with variable rates in the last year or two that wish that they went with a fixed rate, because the variable rate now, a lot of people are up definitely over what you guys are paying. I think you're probably talking about, like, yeah, you probably got a 5-year fixed rate and now you can't really change it for those 5 years without paying a penalty of getting out to it. Getting out of it. The variable, if you went with a variable mortgage, it is cheaper and easier to switch than that. To switch out of it, typically you'd only have to pay like 3 months interest or something, or they give you an option to lock in at a fixed rate. But yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both, and you can do a lot of research online and talk to a mortgage broker, talk to the lender, and try to get the pros and cons. But depending on your situation, it also affects which one's best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. Was there any kind of closing remarks that you had in mind that you wanted to share with people before we go?
No, I think just plan for the unexpected.
Plan for the unexpected. There you go.
The only lesson I learned here. So.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Rafaela. It was a pleasure to work with you and your husband and buying your home. And thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experience. Definitely a little different than what I guess the typical experience when someone's buying a newer property. So I hope people that are watching or listening get a chance to learn from your experience, and hopefully they're able to take that and run with it. But thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.